So in this video we're going to be looking at the Sigma 35mm 1.4 Art Series lens. We're going to be seeing some photographs and some videos shot with the lens on both the Panasonic GH4 and on the Canon 5D Mark III. Now I've owned this lens for about a year and it's been absolutely brilliant. I've had no problems with it whatsoever. I can say though, when I first got the lens, unfortunately it wasn't perfect straight out of the box. I had to purchase the separate Sigma dock. This allowed me to calibrate the lens because it was back focusing. However, once I tweaked that, it was perfectly fine. Now obviously you've all heard about the Sigma Art lenses. Yep, they're very good. They're built really well. They're optically fantastic, super sharp, really nice and contrasty. They do feel like a premium piece of equipment. However, all lenses really that are 35mm prime lenses in that kind of category, with the Canon, the Nikon, the Rokinon, the Samyangs, even the older Sigma 35, they're all optically fantastic. They're all beautiful. They're all going to give you brilliant image quality. So don't get hung up about sharpness and so forth. They're all fantastic. And of course, we've always got Photoshop and Lightroom, and we can always add a little bit of sharpening if the image straight out of the camera is not good enough. And when it comes to photography, personally, being a portrait and kind of fashion photographer, I do a lot of work in post-processing. So I've got a big editing workflow and it's part of my process. So I always add a little bit of sharpening as well, mess around with colors, do some grading. So the images always end up going through that phase anyway. And I know even if I use the Canon or the Nikon version or any 35mm prime, I'd still get the same kind of images, because essentially it's not really the lens, it's how I've gone about using lights and composition, framing, viewpoint. All of those things have been the main deciding factor regarding the success of the image. Now obviously, as you do when you first get a new lens, you're going to kind of test it out. That's what I did. I went out into the garden, had a play with it, put it on the GH4. Just a side note, in order for the Canon lens to work on the GH4, you are going to need an adapter, and I use the Metabone Speed Booster. It's a really good adapter. It makes your lens actually a stop brighter, so it makes it actually like a faster lens, and it also increases the field of view and reduces the crop factor. And the lens performed really well. The pictures and the video came out really nice. Here I shot in 4K at 24 frames per second. It was all pretty much handheld. I think there was a couple of little tripod shots, but this is all straight out of camera. There's no grading or anything being done. Then I put the lens on the 5D Mark III and took some photographs of the kids. And again, the pictures came out really nice. If you were able to nail that 1.4 aperture with moving subjects, which really is tricky because the depth of field is so thin, but once it does happen and you manage to get it, the outcome looks really, really nice. Also shooting video, you can see here I'm at 60 frames per second. I've conformed the footage afterwards in post to 24 frames per second, which naturally slows down the footage. And again, this is straight out of camera. There's no editing being done, no color grading or anything. I've set the camera picture profile on the GH4 to portrait, and I've manually dialed in the white balance just to make it a little bit warmer, because the auto white balance was just a little bit too cool for that time of the day. Now the first time I got to really use it on a proper shoot was when I did some portraiture work of a model in a naturally lit environment. And one thing I really like about the 35mm focal length is the fact that it obviously allows more of the background, more of the environment to come through, and that really adds to the narrative of a picture. It is kind of like a storytelling lens. So back to some more video. Here I'm working with another model, and it was just like a video portrait piece. Shooting here at 96 frames per second, and this was one of my earlier videos, and I've kind of realized not to shoot in 96 frames because the image quality suffers quite a lot. You're actually better off shooting at 60 frames and then slowing down to 24. You just end up getting much better quality. Now the real test was when I got to use it with the 5D Mark III on a full day photo shoot in a beautiful mansion, amazing models, great styling, makeup, hair, just awesome, all natural light with just a fantastic space. And that's when the lens really shone for me. That 35mm focal length on a full frame sensor, capturing the space, putting the models in context, trying to create a narrative and a storyline, just felt cinematic. and it was extremely satisfying to kind of look back at the camera afterwards at the end of the day, go through the pictures, just realize that almost 99% of them were all pin sharp where I wanted them to be. And obviously these images have been given a certain look. I've worked with sharpness, I've worked with the contrast, obviously the color, I've faded areas, I've added more contrast in other areas, I've cropped a little bit from the top and the bottom to give it a bit more of an anamorphic look, you could say. If you are interested in the way I went about editing these, and just add some comments below and I might do a video and go through the actual workflow of achieving such a similar look. Whilst I was there, I also got to shoot a bit of video, so I put the lens back on the GH4. Again, here I'm shooting at 96 frames per second, hence why you can see some kind of artifacts here and there. This wasn't really planned, it was all handheld, and again I was quite happy with what I got. Now since then, as I've had the lens now for over a year, I've used it a lot more, and I found that it's a brilliant lens to use on the GH4 with the Metabones. It gives a really nice cinematic field of view. I think it's Super 35 when you actually use it with the XL Cinema 4K mode. And another brilliant thing about the lens is it focuses really close. All in all, it's just a very nice lens. Now let me just go back to my first point again. Even if I use the Canon or any 35mm prime lens, as long as it had the aperture and the speed that I needed, I could have got the exact same images, because essentially, although the lens was wonderfully sharp and so forth, any lens with that focal length would have allowed me to achieve those kind of images. I would have just simply added more sharpening if I needed to in post, and maybe more contrast if it was lacking those things in the first place. So don't ever feel that just by magically putting on a Sigma art lens that something tremendous will happen overnight and all your images are going to be like amazing. Image quality in terms of sharpness, vignetting, chromatic aberration, they are not the deciding factors on the quality of a photograph. Those of you that know, it's all about light and composition and all of those things. Anyway, those are my views on the Sigma 35. If you're thinking about buying it, you will not be disappointed. I would recommend maybe purchasing the dock as well. I know a couple of people who've bought both the 50 and the 35 that had focusing issues initially, which were all corrected after the use of the dock. If it's out of your budget, then go for the 35 Sigma, the older version, the Mark 1 version. Also, if you're just doing video, I would go with the Rockinon. I've got a friend who's got the 35 Samyang, and it's fantastic. I'd say it's probably sharper, and it's probably renders the background blur even smoother than the Sigma. It's a manual focus lens, but if you're doing video, then it doesn't really matter. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any comments, please leave them below. Subscribe, give me a thumbs up and a like, and I'll see you in the next video.